their participants, for the students, for the alumni all across the world. And we get the support from almost all the associations all across the world. And this particular webinar is brought to us by BITMA Telangana and BITMA Silicon Valley. My special thanks to Mr. Shashwat Mohanty from BITMA Telangana and Mr. Rajesh Srivastav from BITMA Silicon Valley to bring this to us. Today, we have our guest as Mr. Shomit Ghose, and the host of this webinar is Mr. Rajesh Srivastav. Mr. Shomit Ghose is a 20-year Silicon Valley venture capitalist and a 20-year startup entrepreneur. He spent a long career as a general partner at a Silicon Valley venture capitalist firm, ONSET Ventures, investing in data-centric startups, before which he was a software entrepreneur himself, successfully serving in virtually all startups operating roles. Throughout his career, Shomit has participated in multiple IPOs and many successful exits via merger and acquisitions. He currently serves as an adjunct professor in entrepreneurship and innovation at the University of San Francisco, lecturer in data at UC Berkeley College of Engineering, and entrepreneurial advisor at UC Riverside. Shomit holds his degree in computer science from UC Berkeley and is involved in many corporate and scientific advisory boards internationally. Shomit's startup roles included 3 highly successful IPOs as SVP of Operations at Tumblewood Communications, VP of Worldwide Services at Broadvision, and software engineer at Sun Microsystems. He was also CEO and board member of ONSET portfolio company Truviso for 2 years, leading to its acquisition by Cisco Systems. Shomit has deep experience as a corporate board member in public and private companies, both in the US and Europe. Shomit serves on the advisory boards of UC Berkeley College of Engineering, Sutarlag Center, Bioinnovation Institute, Copenhagen, Beta.Health, Denmark, and Lundbeck Foundation Clinical Research Fellowship Program. He is also a mentor at the German accelerator Wilfrid Laurier University, Canada, and the Nordic Innovation House. So I'm sure that each one of you will definitely learn a lot from his particular presence. To introduce Mr. Rajesh Srivastav, he is our own BITN from BIT Meshara 1983 batch, and is currently working at North America, at Silicon Valley, and is very cooperative in organizing various events for our BITMA community. I'm thankful to both of you, and my special thanks to Shomit once again to bring this idea into reality. So without wasting much time, I will now request Mr. Rajesh to please go ahead with this conversation. Rajesh sir, please.
I'm sorry, I was muted. Thank you, Vishal sir, and welcome everyone. Good morning and good evening as to wherever you are in this world joining us. I'm really excited about this event. Multiple things. First of all, it allows me to bring in my old friend of 20 plus years into this conversation. Something which is very venture capital funding, something which is very dear to me, to my heart. You know, I love the building of enterprises and building of economy and value is what I love to do. I will very quickly, just a second, I've got to admit a lot of these people in, okay, as I talk. Sorry about that. What I have done is, I know Shomit is a VC, has been there, is a very well-known guy here. He's participated in many, initial round financing for smaller company startups. He's gone through M&As. He's gone through a lot of successful exits, IPOs. Before I give it to Shomit, I know that my audience up here is a full spectrum of people, starting from somebody who might be starting out, trying to learn things, to some very experienced people in here. So just for them, I have quickly put together 2 or 3 slides, which I am going to be sharing here. And these slides are, by the way, available. Just give me a second. They are going to be available through our website. And you can actually, and Vishal sir, once he sends out the email, we'll be able to share it with you. Just give me a second. Okay, here I am. So this is what I shared. These are very quickly some funding notes, and then I would like to hand it over to Shomit, our guest today, for his speech. So what is this entire thing all about? I think this is one of the most important curves entrepreneurs should know about. Could people mute in the background, please? Um, this is called a hockey stick curve here. The entire financing business, in any business you want to run, revolves around this curve. And by the way, this hockey stick curve, this is not the Indian field hockey. This is the ice hockey. That's why I put the picture here. And this is where it takes off. Everything takes off. So your financing, your product management, your product building, your product delivery, everything depends on this particular thing, on this particular curve. And that is essentially you should be able to have a projection and be able to take your concept and be able to could you please mute in the background, please?
तो एक तो सबसे बड़ा इंपॉर्टेंट मैं पर्सनली तो केपेक्स ओरिएंटेड कंपनी पे ज्यादा ध्यान देता हूं क्योंकि ट्रिगर्स अगर होंगे तो ही शेयर चलता है ट्रिगर कैसे आएगा या तो ट्रिगर उसका सेल ग्रोथ हो या
I request everybody to please be muted.
Okay, sorry about that. So this is the core concept of the hockey stick curve. You're going to be hearing this again and again as you go along. The second one I wanted to talk about very, very quickly is to touch upon, and I'm not going to get into details. This is a vast topic. People spend years doing this. The multiple progressive stages of business financing. The first round or the first one, you have a concept, you build it, which is called the seed round. Money comes in from your friends, families, mama, chacha, and fools, whoever believes in you and is going to invest in you. The second round, you go get more serious and you go to what is called an angel investing. And these are people who understand business, who bring in value and will invest in your idea. After that, you go to VC stages or VC, the initial funding and the ABCD, depending on a number of stages. And finally, an exit process of either M&A or IPO. This is how you progress. So you cannot jump into VC funding right away. You have to have few things done before you go in there. And other thing I wanted to let people know is smart money. This is my last thing before I involve Shomit into this. And smart money is essentially you can raise money from fools. Money is no different. A green dollar is green dollar from everybody. But smart money basically means is that along with that money, what kind of contacts, what kind of customers is going to bring. So if let's say somebody is going to put in $100,000 in your company and just sit there, that's one kind of investment. The second one is somebody comes in with $100,000 and probably 5 other customers. That's the smart money. Number one. Number two, since you know that you have to go through several stages of funding. Every time you go through a funding, your old investors get diluted. You don't want to bring in stubborn investors who don't understand the value, the larger, having a small piece of a larger pie. You want to hold on to the pie itself. And this is where the real problem is. Okay, so with that smart money concept, I'll stop the sharing. Just give me a second. Okay, so with that, I will bring in, some questions I'll have, and I'll lead you to into a discussion with Shomit. Just so, Shomit, I mean, we built up, some information is there with the people. You have been involved with, funding so many startup companies in your career. One of the things I want to understand, and if you could give us some examples of where you have successfully gone and invested, what what kind of things you were looking for or they drew you to invest into those. Shomit, please.
All right, first of all, thank you to BITS for having me here today. Thank you, Vishal and Rajesh, for having me here today. Thrilled to be here. So, and by the way, for the members of the audience here, I'm completely informal. So if you want to ask any questions or interrupt, please feel free to do so. Now, Rajesh, to answer your question, you asked what was it that drew me to invest in some successful startups. It's the same thing that drew me to invest in unsuccessful startups. So the cold reality, unfortunately, is that you look for a certain set of markers and you only invest if those markers are there. But many times still, the deal doesn't work out. And the deal will be done in by all kinds of different things. It could be market timing. I'd invested in a company in the Internet of Things space, which is the right space to be in, but I invested in 2005. It was unfortunately too early for the market. Had it been founded 10 years later, it probably would have been quite successful, but it was too early. So sometimes you make the decision for all the right market reasons, but you get the timing wrong. The kinds of factors that we look at to make an investment, probably I'm going to guess maybe around four areas there, which are of really salient importance. The number one and biggest thing is the size of the market itself. Investors are always looking for market opportunities that are in the multiple billions of dollars. So in fact, if any of you are doing a startup and you sit down to talk to a VC, some of the first words out of your mouth needs to be,
Yeah, go ahead, Shomit. I'll go ahead and mute.
Shomit, you have gone mute.
Yeah, sorry.
Yes.
Here we go. All right. So what I was saying is that when you speak to an investor, some of the first words out of your mouth really have to be about the size of the market that you're investing in. This is the number one concern of an investor. And investors look for markets which are in the multiple billions of dollars per year in size. Anything smaller than that won't move the needle for them to help them drive returns. So find a big market, make sure it's in the multiple billions of dollars per year. And the reason for this is that big markets imply big exits. Investors get paid when a company exits, when it gets acquired or goes IPO. The valuation on exit is generally a multiple of revenue. So you need big revenue to get a big valuation, and you only get big revenues in big markets. So when you think about a market that you want to enter, first and foremost for yourself, ensure that it's a big market, and then be prepared to tell the investor why it is a big market. So that's the number one thing, Rogers. Number two, of course, is defensibility, because if you find a great market, other people may enter it too. My religious view on this is that the only defensible market today is something that is founded on data as a value proposition. If you think about Amazon and Google, they will disrupt every company. Ask yourself the question, can we think of a company anywhere in the world that will not be disrupted by Amazon or Google, or companies that have that same philosophy as Amazon and Google do? And I'm going to say that the answer is no. Every company will be disrupted by the sort of business model that Amazon and Google bring. And Amazon and Google, they build their business models on top of data. So for you to have a sustainable startup, one that can sustain itself in the long term as a business, most importantly, to be able to secure financing in the short term, you too must have a business value proposition that's founded on data. And I have a pretty strong religious view on that. And we can talk about why data is so important. So that's probably the second thing. So if you found a big market, great, wonderful, you found a good thing to do in that big market, but how do you sustain your value? That's the next thing that will come out. And I think the thing that you put forward there is the defensibility built on data. Of course, you must have an economic model that drives revenue for you. It's not sufficient just to have a great technology at a big market if there's not a underlying economic value. How do you help your customers either make money or save money? And that economic model, ideally, a good rule of thumb that I like is, can you get to 100 million in revenue in 5 years? So can you do that? Then probably most importantly, of course, out of all these things, is the team, the quality of the team. It's really a cliche by now, but it's true. Good teams win even with tough markets, whereas bad teams will lose even with great markets. And for an investor, a good team mitigates the risk. Everything is in constant state of flux. Markets are in flux, competitors in flux, the state of financing is in flux, government regulation, all these things are changing day to day. And it's only those good teams that can hear what the market conditions are telling them and adapt accordingly and build a path to success. So I think those are the 4 biggest things, Rajesh.
Great, Shomit. Earlier we talked about, during the few slides which I presented, we talked about progressive stages of funding. And so you do come across multiple investors coming in at different times in a company's life. Now, with every investment, there is something called a term sheet. I mean, these are the terms of investment which come into picture. By the time you go in, VCs come in, it is fairly advanced. There is product, there is some market in there. In your opinion, because now you have multiple, term sheets sitting in there. If you find a stubborn investor who is unwilling to get diluted and things like that, how does it impact the future funding of the company?
Yeah, and that's an excellent question, Rajesh. I like the slide that you showed, which showed the 4 stages there. Every company progresses across that timeline. Yes. And yeah, at the very beginning, by the way, to get, first, of course, your friends and family will come in because they like you. That's probably the easiest money to get. But then going forward, you actually have to show validation to the next set of customers, next set of investors, which are your customers actually, but next set of investors. Starting first with the angel investors, and an angel investors, they are investing for a financial return. So you need to show them, at the outset, you need to bring them as much validation as possible. And then with each subsequent stage, things may get a little bit more challenging. And this is where term sheets start to get complicated. So at the earliest stages, as you might have pointed out there, Rajesh, things are easier because the company is simple. There are no complications. So it's like, if you look at a baby, every baby has equal prospect for success. Some will succeed and some will not, but it's hard to tell, when you're just looking at a baby. Same with startups. So maybe at the outset, term sheets are fairly simple and straightforward because no complications have been inserted into the startup's life. But going forward, things happen. You missed your numbers. You missed your sales numbers. A competitive situation occurred. Key members of the team left. All sorts of things can happen. And this is where term sheets start to get more complicated. I've always been an early stage VC, so I'll address your question from that perspective. But as companies progress down that path across the multiple stages of financing, if the companies have had any difficulty, then that starts to become manifested in the term sheets. And the more complicated, and this is known as having a term sheet with a lot of hair on it, but the more complicated things become, the more difficult it is in the next round to raise financing. So, correct. What kinds of things can pop up? A simple one would be a simple indicator of whether the company has succeeded from the last round to the current round is this an up round financing? Are you getting a higher value for the company at this stage than you did at the last stage? If it's a down round, that brings concern to the new investor because the new investor is thinking, is this an accelerating business or a decelerating business? No one wants to invest in a decelerating business. So it's problematic if the valuation is not an up round. It's also problematic if the valuation is not at market conditions. It's way too high, for example, is not reflective of the underlying dynamics of the company. Because the valuation is too high, then the new investor can't buy a meaningful enough piece of the company with the current round's investment. So even that would be a warning flag. So complicated cap tables. So if you look at the ownership of the company as reflected in the capitalization table, the cap table, is that like super complicated? And are there terms in the past closing documents which allow even tiny small investors to have unwarranted sway over what the company does? So were the previous rounds of financing, did they have terms that were clean, which allowed the largest investors to collectively make the decisions and not be overly reliant on very small minority investors? If you're familiar with the concept of preference terms.
Yes.
Preference terms, yeah, of course, and for the people here in the audience, preference terms means how does your stock get treated in a preferred basis on an exit like an M&A? Do you get a multiple back on your investment? So preference terms get injected when the past rounds of financings or even the current round of financing is problematic. So you're raising some money, but gee, boy, things really haven't gone well in previous history in the company. So to sweeten the pot, to make it attractive for the new investor to come in, there's a preference term which will say right off the bat, on an exit via an M&A, you get 2x your money back right off the top before anyone else gets any money. So that's very favorable for the new investor, but the presence of a preference term may indicate that the reason the sweetening had to be done to attract the new investors because the company didn't perform as expected in the past. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. So there's a whole set of these things. There's things like
there are. I mean, we can
yeah.
go into this. I mean, it's a can of worms we can open. And
right.
as you rightly said, I mean, the reason why I brought this up is just to ensure. Could you please mute? Thank you, Sarojini. The whole idea behind this thing is that people should know that, okay, financing is one part, but then financing is going to come to you at what terms? And it could dissuade future investments coming into your company. I mean, that's a real risk you run if you don't do it smartly. I see a lot of questions coming in, Shomit, and we're going to pick it up. Let's just go through our talk initially, and if there are these questions are there, we can always pick them up, and I can offline we can talk and give them answers if need be, if we run out of time. But we have planned for a time about 15 minutes at the end of this. So guys, we'll open it up for you. You can ask your direct questions towards the end. Let's just go with the flow here. In that, one more thing I have seen, and this is a common thing, and you might want to throw some light for our audience here, Shomit. What is happening is, I mean, we go and see the companies do get investments. Some few big ones get $100 million and one VC invests in them. But typically you find that a small company raises $10 million and there are about 8 VCs consolidating in there. What's going on? Why, there are these people. It's not that these individual funds or individual VCs cannot actually put in $10 million. Why do VCs consolidate?
I'm sorry, as far as VCs investing into the same company?
Same company.
Yeah.
Same round also.
Yeah, same. Yeah. So, I think when a company has separated itself from the pack and appears to be among the leaders, everybody wants to be participating in that. And there's also a signaling value when you have, we have a lot of name brand investors coming into a company. So it's signaling value of this is this is one of the winners because we have just knocked down some of the biggest names in Silicon Valley as our investors. So people want to play with the winners, and when the winners start to separate from the rest of the pack, that's what draws the investment. And you see this manifested particularly in late stage deals, of course, because at that point, Series C, Series D, et cetera, the winners have separated from the rest of the pack.
Okay. Okay. So it's fairly common, and because one perception people have is, let's say $10 million had to be raised for Series B, whatever it is. And five companies consolidated, came in, participated, assuming it's $2 million each. So the thing is, people are saying it's not attractive enough for a single company to come in. I mean, that's also perception.
No, actually, I would say that what you may be seeing in that case is that new investors who find the opportunity exciting, and the existing investors, the ones who'd invested in the past rounds, also see that the company is doing well. So they want to continue to have participation in that round. So they're saying, hey, we like this deal so much, we're taking our pro rata. And the new investors come in that just say, hey, we love this deal, we want to participate too. So that might be what you're seeing. So it's not a reflection to the negative that this happens, it's actually a reflection to the positive.
Okay, great. Okay, so let me do a time check. We are perfect on time. So with that, Shomit, I mean, I know you have been investing, you've been active, quite a bit. You've also moved into the academic side of things lately. And so what are the new areas of investment that interest you? And where do you see the traction these days, at least in the Valley or worldwide now? Because the picture is now worldwide.
Yeah, exactly. No, I think that's a great comment you made there, Rajesh, is that solutions are worldwide. I think the day of companies who could afford to be merely regional has passed. All companies should aspire to be global. And if you don't, you will, by the way, fall competitive victim to a competitor who does see themselves as being global. They built a product that works everywhere, where you've only built a product that works in one place. So always, one of my strong bits of advice to startup entrepreneurs is think global from day one. Doesn't matter where it is you're starting. On day one, you're assuming a global market. So that's super important. I mentioned earlier that I have these very strong views, emotional views on the import of data. So the importance of data as the foundation of any business model. And again, look no further than Amazon, Google, Facebook, Apple, Uber, you name it. All of these companies are data-driven. And this is the future. So no matter what your overt business appears to be, you may manifest in one way, but actually you're about the data business. So for example, here I'm wearing my Fitbit here. You probably know Google bought Fitbit a couple of years ago. Google bought Fitbit not because that it was a really cool device. They bought Fitbit because it provides a data stream. Everything is about the data. So if some of you here are thinking about doing startups, joining startups, or even working in a big company, truly think about how does data define this business and how do you capture value through that data signature. Importantly, when you look at data, there are different ways of looking at data. And I'll start off by giving a little example here, but the assertion I'm going to make is data is interesting when it's predictive, when you can predict what's going to happen. So here's my simple example. So what if I said to you, Rajesh, how much would you pay me to tell you the price of gold yesterday? You'd say, I'd pay you $0. I could Google that myself. Besides, what could I do with the knowledge of the price of gold yesterday? Okay, so you'd pay me $0 for the price of gold yesterday. What if I could tell you the price of gold 15 minutes from now? And you'd say, that's mildly interesting, but it's probably pretty strongly correlated to the price of gold right now. So 15 minutes from now, if you could tell me the price of gold is going up or down, I don't know, Shomit, I'll give you $10. Okay. So now what you've seen is now I'm predicting a little bit into the future and it's starting to have value. Rajesh, I'm going to tell you with 95% accuracy what the price of gold will be tomorrow. Roger says, wow, 95% accuracy a day from now, this is great. I'm going to empty my bank account. I'm going to either buy or sell gold, whatever the right prediction there is. And Shomit, I'll give you half the proceeds. So now we've pushed the prediction horizon out by a day. But because it's a fairly accurate prediction horizon, Roger's just thinking there's value, even greater value than if I told him the price of gold 15 minutes from now. Finally, I say, Rajesh, I'll tell you the price of gold, 85% accuracy a year from now. Rajesh says, wow, this is great. I'm going to quit my job, start a private equity firm, going to raise 50 billion. Because we're going to make 500 billion, because Shomit's going to tell me the price, 85% accuracy, the price of gold a year from now, I'll make a killing. So what you've seen here is the value of prediction. The further out you can push a high fidelity prediction, the more valuable the data becomes. If you look carefully at every Silicon Valley company, all the big successful ones, you'll see that they're actually in the prediction business. They take this data and they curve fit it and they predict what's going to happen. So I said here at the beginning that every business must be a data-driven business. But when you think of your startup or your even your larger legacy company as a data-driven business, think about how you can harness that data for prediction, to predict what's going to happen, just as we did here with the price of gold example. It's a known science and a completed business to look at data in retrospect. That's how we did things in the old days when all we had was access to relational databases. We could query them and find out what had happened. And nowadays, thanks to this huge volume of data and machine learning, we can predict. That's where value lies. So what do I find exciting nowadays? Companies that can use data, proprietary data streams, and leverage those to make a prediction in some meaningful economic use case, which will drive a business.
Okay. So could you cite some examples, of things which you see going around and you think that they are going to be the future Googles and Ubers coming up from out of those?
Sure. Yeah, in fact, I think Uber is a great example. We'll come back to that. But if you think about what's going on in fintech today, fintech is the scene of quite a bit of business and technology innovation nowadays. And you think about the banking business has been around for thousands of years, right? Mm-hmm. If you went back to ancient India in 3000 BC, there were people engaged in the banking business. Yeah. So this has been there forever. So why is fintech disrupting this tremendously old industry? I mean, banking finance has always been about numbers. The thing that the fintechs are doing is twofold. One is they're looking at many different data signals, so multidimensional data signals, not just a few. A traditional bank, when Rajesh applies for a loan, will look at your credit score, your income, and your assets. They'll evaluate 3 dimensions, 3 different data points, and decide whether or not to give you a loan, and also figure out if they do give you a loan, what the interest rate should be. What the fintechs have figured out is that there are actually not just 3 data signals that will tell us about Rajesh's worthiness for a loan. There might be 3,000, and they've discovered what each of those 3,000 are. So the fintechs are really good at looking at thousands of different data signals, all of which have been shown to correlate to Rajesh's loan risk. And importantly, they can even predict when Rajesh needs a loan. So think of that. So they can predict what kind of a loan he may need before he knows it himself, because they'll be looking at all these different data signals. So they predict your need for a particular product, and then they'll predict what is your ability to pay that back, and does that mean a higher or a lower interest rate over what period, et cetera. That's what you're seeing in fintech. It's a prediction business using highly dimensional data, thousands of different data signals. So we're seeing that. If you think about Uber is a great case in point, because Uber is not a ride-hailing service in my mind, because taxi cabs are a ride-hailing service. Uber is let's predict how much Rajesh will pay for a Uber ride based on all of those factors that are unique to him. Does Rajesh walk, or does he take a car when it's raining or it's super hot? Because, if it's raining or super hot, he always takes the car. Wonderful. We can predict how much he will pay 6 months from now, because we look at the weather forecast for Palo Alto, California, 6 months from June 14th. It's going to be raining typically on December 14th. So we know that Rajesh is going to be paying a premium for that Uber ride. So I think Uber is a great example for people who have an interest. I would recommend that they actually read one of those old Uber patents, and what you'll see there is that they list a bunch of different data sources which they amalgamate and they use to predict the price for rides for we consumers. And that's the brilliance in what they're doing. I think this sort of an approach, same as what we're doing with fintech, same as what Amazon does on e-commerce, using data to predict, this is the model going forward.
Okay, so now the data is important and it's multidimensional. It is the prediction capability of the new ventures is what we are looking at. Could you cite some examples where they could be used? I know that you did talk about in one of your recent articles for UC Berkeley was Starbucks and probably Home Depot and some of these big companies utilizing this, because I want to give the audience a practical idea of where they could apply these kind of things and possibly come up with products. I want to see 2 or 3 people come out of this event and come up and say, hey, I'm creating a company doing this.
Yeah, that's a great prompt there, Roger. So my advice here would be for all of you here to think of this from the business prospect and work backward. So think about what is it that has value that if we could predict, there would be economic value to it, because that's the foundation of a business model, economic value. So think about what if we could predict X, and is there an economic model to it? And that will then imply the kind of data that you need to prosecute that business. If you can find a proprietary data source that helps you drive that prediction, you're off to a great running start. So, I mentioned Fitbit here a little bit ago. I think this is a great example because, here's my Fitbit here. And Google bought them, I think, uncontested for $2.1 billion in November of 2019. No one else bid on them. I think probably because short-sightedly, many other large companies thought, it's a fitness band and fitness bands are commoditized. I mean, who wants a fitness band? But I think Google saw rightly that this is a data signal here. It's a highly dimensional data signal, completely personalized. So they bought the company in November 2019 and January of 2020. This was pre-COVID going worldwide, but January of 2020, there's a paper in the Lancet that says that Fitbit, this thing I'm wearing on my wrist can predict the onset of the flu. So it can figure out that, gee, there's an outbreak of flu in this region. There's a chance that Shomit is developing the flu, et cetera. So you can think about now this data signal from ostensibly what's a fitness band helping predict health state. So that was January of 2020. And by March of 2020, when COVID had really started to impact the planet, further revealing here that my little Fitbit here can also detect something like the oxygen level in my blood, hypoxia. What's a symptom of COVID? Hypoxia. So think about how all of these different diseases can now be mapped and tracked and predicted using data from my fitness band. Google, I believe, has come out since and talked about how they're going to be doing things like blood sugar monitoring using the Fitbit, and even monitoring things like sleep apnea. Predictive healthcare, where does that come from? Yeah, it comes from the very simple data signals off my Fitbit. So, for the startup entrepreneurs, going back to your question here, Roger, for the startup entrepreneurs here among you, think about this large business problem that needs to be solved, that has an underlying economic value to it, and think about how can you predict that, and what data could you use to predict that, and that becomes the foundation for the business. And if you look carefully at any of the large Silicon Valley success stories that we're also familiar with, Netflix, Uber, Google, Amazon, et cetera, they're all about prediction, about using highly dimensional data to do prediction. And you mentioned Starbucks here, Rajesh, because I had written about Starbucks, and we can share that article for people here if they're interested. But if you think about Starbucks, Starbucks, we think of Starbucks as being this worldwide coffee chain, which they are, but Starbucks is really good at using data to drive behavior. So in the article that I'd written, I took a screenshot of my Starbucks app and I broke it down. Everything that was happening on my Starbucks app was meant to influence my behavior. So they'd figured out what pushed my buttons to get me to go in and buy coffee. And they're doing a great job of pushing my buttons to getting me to go in and buy coffee. And because they're so good at using this data-driven behavioral economics to drive my behavior, not only do I go in and buy coffee, but I keep my app loaded with money. because I and many other people like me around the world keep their Starbucks app loaded with money, Starbucks has a very nice private bank going. So they have their own bank. They pay no interest on that nice private bank that they have. And I suspect when they need to borrow money, they can borrow from their nice private bank without having to pay any interest. So, it's such a powerful business model, predicated in my mind, not on the coffee, which is good, but really predicated on the data and driving consumer behavior using the data. So I think that's a great example. And the Starbucks example is good also because it shows how consumer behavior can be driven actively. So you don't have to just wait reactively for consumers. You can actually drive it using behavioral economics. So I'm also a big booster of and particularly attracted to companies that are able to use the zero subsidy effect of behavioral economics in their business.
That's great. I have several questions here. One of them was, people wanted link to that, my presentation, and I will include the link to your article also. For everybody listening to this, Professor Vishal is going to send out an email, which will have the link to my presentation, Shomit's article, as well as a link to the recording wherever it is publicly available. So all three things will be coming out in the next few days, as and when the whatever processes are put into place, and things are processed. Rather, even the video is ready. Let me put it this way. Okay, with that, I will go ahead and open up for questions. Please, one by one, unmute yourself and go ahead and ask the question. Please be brief. We do have about 15 minutes set up for the questioning. And, so go ahead. I'll open it up now.
Hello.
Yes, Tanmay, go ahead.
Hey, hi everyone. So I'm Tanmay Sana. I am from BIT Mesra ITK 18 batch. That means I am passing out from this year, that is 2022. So as Sir mentioned, had a lot of focus on data. I have a question. What is your point of view about decentralized things like blockchain? And I mean, today, Coinbase laid off a lot of people, and the startups which are already focusing are also laying off many employees this year, as we are hearing about the recession news and etc. etc. So what is your point of view upon that? And where do you see the future of blockchain from maybe 5 years or 6 years from now?
Yeah, that's a great question, Tanmay. So I bifurcate this into two things, data into two sections here. One is, there's a little bit of feedback there from somebody.
Can you mute yourself, please? Unmute yourself only when the question is to be asked. Thank you.
Yeah. So anyway, what I was saying is that I bifurcate data into two pieces. There's data storage, and then there's data structures, and there's data signature. Yeah. So if you think about blockchain is data storage, which is great. We actually need things like that to have a nice audit trail data structure that contains information that we can act on. So that's separate from data signatures. Data signatures really mean to how do we use machine learning to figure out, to predict what's happening. So I think blockchain will have its applications. It'll continue to be successful. It'll be the foundation of many new business models, et cetera. My focus really has been on data signature. What can highly dimensional data sources tell us about what's going to happen? How can we use that to predict a economic business case? And how can we always increase that dimensionality of that data? And it's all founded on machine learning, using machine learning to curve fit what conclusions you're trying to drive. So anyways, I think there are two different discussions here. One is blockchain and data structure, data storage. The other is data signature, a la machine learning and highly dimensional data.
Okay. To see a number of people, and their arms are already, they've already signaled to me, Prateek and Rajiv. I'll call you in. Before that, let me ask a quick question to you. BIT Mesra is a multidiscipline engineering institution. This question came to me from my batchmate. He is neither an electronics engineer, not an electrical engineer. He's a mechanical engineer. He says he does not find VCs for his side of things in mechanical. Is there a place, now that you come from that industry, is there a place where non-electrical electronics people could go in and fund their ventures?
Yeah,
or a set of VCs there?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I'm sure there are, because I spent my entire career both as an entrepreneur and as a VC in the software business. So all of my contacts, excuse me, are in the software and data investing space, unfortunately. But all of that said, I think, again, going back to my heartfelt philosophical fixation here, I think every product today has a data component to it. So, think about automobiles. Automobiles are no longer mechanical pieces of engineering. They have integrated into them a lot of intelligence and data already. Plus, every auto manufacturer is working with Google, Amazon, or Apple to integrate those smart agents into the vehicles. So just as automobiles are no longer the mechanical devices, they're mechanical plus data. And it's only that combined whole that we will find interesting going forward. I think the same is true for every product. So if your batchmate's question was, hey, I've got an idea for a mechanical engineering sort of a product, what do I do? My answer would be, step one, think about how you can integrate into it, stitch into it a data signature, something that tells us about what's going on, and have that combined whole. This allows you not only to have a compelling product going forward, which is, I think, all products need, is that data signature bit, but it also allows you to go to data-centric VCs and say, hey, we're about the data. We may have a mechanical engineering component to it, but in the end, we're about the data.
I think that's a very, very smart spin for some of these people. Okay, Prateek, go ahead, unmute yourself and ask your question, please. Prateek Mitra.
Hi, Shomit sir. My name is Peter, and I work in Palo Alto, California.
Sorry about the name.
A lot. So I had a quick question. So I've been hearing a lot about VC winter, that is, because of the upcoming recession and so on. So how do you see that happening? And do you see any particular areas still getting access to funds, for example, climate and so on? I would love to hear your thoughts on that. Thank you.
Hey, what a great question. Yeah, so yeah, I think it's a reality that we're going to be hitting VC winter. That's not necessarily a bad thing, because I think what it will drive is a reversion to normalcy, to the way things used to be. There's been, because we've had this zero interest rate financial climate here for the past several years, it's driven a lot of people into VC investing, because you can't make money on cash. What do? Oh yeah, let's plow money into startups. So you ended up with in asymmetry, more money coming in than there were startups to take the money. That number of startups probably has remained relatively constant over the years, but the amount of money probably went up 4x, 5x. Consequently, there's an oversupply. So we ended up with over 1,000 unicorns. So that kind of feeding frenzy, I think, will now be mitigated. The nuclear winter, I believe, is indeed approaching. You've probably seen a lot of organizations, Y Combinator and others, who have cautioned their portfolio companies on spending. And there's been cutbacks. A lot of startups with large financings, recent financings, have had layoffs because they're battening down the hatches. So I think that will continue. In the end, I think maybe we can view it as a correction and not as destruction. And maybe it's a return a little bit to the normalcy that we used to have prior to the current spate of financing. How long will this last? I don't know. I think the view is that the recession that we're facing may be a short-lived one. So perhaps we can return to some amount of growth here within the next year. The question on financing for climate-related deals and deals that have positive impact on the planet and on human society, I think that's going to increase too here going forward. The amount of problems that we're having are ramifying, all these problems that we're having with climate change, food security, everything, pandemic, all of this, these things are ramifying and will continue to do so. It'll require our acute interest. So, if you have a thought on doing something that is climate focused or human health focused, food security focused, I suspect you'll get a more ready audience with an investor than in the old days of pitching a food delivery startup or a dating startup.
Okay. Next question. Rajiv, go ahead, please. Unmute yourself and ask your question.
Hello.
Yes.
Hi.
Go ahead.
Hi. Good morning. Good evening, everyone. Rajiv this side from 2003 batch. My question is, say a company is bootstrapped, this is technically sound, they have very good product to take to the market. So, and the project is in pilot phase. Until it's Series A, it's not VC that is going to fund. So till now, it is actually for the seed funding, it's angel investor. So many times it happens that I have come across of some of the startup founders that they're technically sound, but they lack the economic calculations. So how share allocation to the fund being asked should be calculated by the founder and or the team?
Yeah. So your question, Rajiv, was about the how do you apportion the stock with the new investors, splitting the equity? Yeah.
Yes.
So so that's a really good question. So the valuation of the company is set by the buyer. So the buyer in this case is the investor. So when you're getting startup financing, it's a buyer's market. It's rare that the founder, the seller, gets to set the price. The buyer will set the price. So when you're raising money, what you want to do is to get in front of the best quality VCs for your particular deal, and then basically ask them, what's it going to take to get a deal done with you? Because I want to work with you. Can we put together an arrangement that works both for the investors and for the team? And importantly, it needs to work for both of you equally well. Otherwise, if you enter an investor relationship where the investor is taking advantage of you by giving you too low of a valuation, you will never trust that investor. And that's a terrible way to start a marriage, which is basically what a investor-entrepreneur relationship is. So it should be equitable where both parties see, yep, I can see that I benefited. I can see that my partner, the entrepreneur or the investor, also benefited. So ultimately the equity split, how is that done? It'll be done in real time once you found that right investor and you've had I wouldn't call it a negotiation because it needs to be a partnership, but you've had that discussion of partnership. How do we best partner? And the investor will say, this is what will work for me, and you'll find some middle ground that'll work for you too. And you'll go from there, and that will imply how the equity gets split between founders and investors. Within the team itself, you and your founding team, it's up to you to decide who gets the lion's share or if it's equally split or whatever, but that will be an internal discussion. And in fact, the investor will leave it to you to sort that bit out. And so when you talk to the investor, make sure you've nailed it down, because what the investor doesn't want to see that there's infighting among the founding team as to who gets what.
Okay, Shomit, I think based on the time, we have 5-6 minutes more. Very quickly, there is a question from me directly here, which is there a standard timeline for startups to move from one VC stage to another VC stage? Is there a thumb rule they follow?
Yeah, I would say it's probably like between 18 months might be a good amount of time. Investors don't want to see too little time nor too much time. Too little time, you're not going to get any business validations delivered. You just don't have enough time to bring those additional validations of business back to the investor. And too long time implies too much risk. So I give you this money, and if you're going to disappear for the next 2 or 3 years, who knows if you're putting that money to good effect. So I'd like to see you surface, pop your head up from swimming underwater and checkpoint how far along you are. So yeah, maybe 18 months is a good time horizon for that.
Great, great. Okay. With that, I think based on the time, you're 5 minutes on the just before the hour. I would like to thank you again, Shomit, for coming, joining us, and answering the questions here. In the meantime, if people have more questions, please do send them offline. What we are doing here is, as I said, the institute, the BITMA, that is Vishal sir, his team is going to send out an email to everybody with the link to the recording set of my slides. And a lot of these questions, although I didn't show up my entire slide, I do talk about the pre-money and post-money valuation and few other things, how it is calculated, things like that. That's just the early stage, nothing else. I mean, I'm not a VC. I do invest here and there, but I'm not a VC myself. I've put few things together. Also, we're going to be including a link to a WhatsApp group, which is going to be a closed group, so that entrepreneurs can join and we can share our views, at least from Silicon Valley and from India, from all other places. Seasoned entrepreneurs from BIT can contribute, and if need be, we can always take our questions to experts like Shomit. I mean, we do have a big if Shomit can't answer, then he can always refer us to somebody. So anyway, I mean, it's going to be a great resource going forward. And Shomit, as always, great talk here again. Very good points. I mean, these are things which people don't normally usually get to see, and it's not easy. I mean, these things come with experience. I mean, and getting to people like you every day is not possible. So with that, I will hand over to Vishal sir. Vishal sir, your wrapping remarks on this.
Yes, sir. Thank you, Rajesh sir. It was a wonderful power-packed talk, definitely. Shomit spoke about the valuation, the way a company can be acquired, and the importance of the data. Today, as I see, data is everywhere. I was in the morning only reading about, if everybody knows, Internet Explorer is no more going to function now. It has been stopped today. The reason behind what I see is a lot of data is coming, and one thing which we all need to think about is, do not rely ourselves on a single particular usage. For example, nowadays we are very much relying upon only Google. A day will come when Google will try to capture everything. So data is what Google is trying to capture. WhatsApp, a free app given to us, but it is not free. It is costing our time, and it is trying to capture the behavior. And as Shomit rightly pointed out, Fitbit is not sold because it is a watch or a management system, but it is because of data only. So data is the new buzzword, and everything around us will remain moving across the data. And if we can handle data, maybe good data or bad data, it will definitely help you to learn how to manage a company. So definitely it was a very good, wonderful talk, Shomit and Rajesh. I'm indebtedly thankful to you both. And once again, thankful to all of you who were present till this late, and we'll be seeing you more. I've put a link over here where if you have not registered yourself earlier, please do register so that I can share the link of the videos and the PPTs. So this is all from my side. Rajesh sir, if you want to have a quick wrap up now.
Thank you, Vishal sir. I think that's a great ending and our first session. I welcome everybody. I mean, we see a lot of live, very good number of people who have joined us, and also the number of people who signed up for this is also pretty good, considering that this type of event was the first one. Thank you all for joining. Please register so that the links and other details can be sent to you. And we also would know who the real audience are. You have any questions and other things, do reach out to Vishal sir and we'll figure out a channel, and do become part of the WhatsApp group we are going to be. I mean, it's already created. We'll share the link with you. Thank you, Shomit. And as always, great talking to you and great points. Thank you all. Bye.
Thank you, sir. Thank you.
Bye.